Hi, today we are going to apply the relationships in the two special right triangles to solve for missing side lengths. We have two special right triangles, the 45, 45, 90 and the 30, 60, 90 special right triangle. Okay, first let's consider the square. The square has four right angles, right? So I'm going to put four right angles on each corner. These are all 90-degree angles, and all the sides are congruent. So if one side of a square is 3 centimeters, they will all be 3 centimeters. They are congruent. So I mark them with a little tally mark to show that they're congruent. So I'm going to take the square and draw the diagonal across. And notice I made two congruent triangles. When I drew the diagonal, these angles were split in half, so 90 divided by 2 is 45, so each angle is 45 degrees. Okay, so I drew this right triangle here. This is a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle. So remember, when you have a right triangle, you have the two sides are called legs. So here's one leg. So this is a leg, this one down here is a leg, and then this one across from the right angle, that is my hypotenuse. So since this is a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle, I know that these two legs are going to be exactly the same size. So if one of them is 5 centimeters, the other one has to be 5 centimeters. Now the properties with 45, 45, 90 special right triangles is that the two sides are the same, right? The two legs will always be the same. So if one of them is 5 centimeters, the other one will be 5 centimeters. Now the hypotenuse is going to be whatever the leg is. So whatever the leg, the length of the leg, I'm going to find the length of the leg and I'm going to multiply it times the square root of 2. So the leg times the square root of 2. So if I said my leg was 5 centimeters, this leg is 5 centimeters. The horizontal leg would also be 5 centimeters. And then the hypotenuse would just be 5 times the square root of 2. All right, so we're going to practice the 45, 45 special right triangle. So I look at my triangle. I notice this one is 45 degrees. The angle over here is 45 degrees, and it's a right angle. So this is one of the special right triangles. So we're going to talk about the properties. So first notice it has two legs, right? That's a leg, and this one is a leg, and they are exactly the same size. Every time you have a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle, the legs will always measure the same. So I'm going to compare everything to the leg. So I'm going to label the leg as an X here. So this will always be X. So my leg is going to be X. And my other leg is exactly the same. So I'm going to write X too. So the length of the leg is X. And earlier I said that the length of the hypotenuse is whatever the leg is times the square root of 2. So whatever the leg is times the square root of 2. So then I look, do I know one of the lengths? So I know the length of this leg is 3 centimeters. So I'm going to come into my chart here, and the leg measures 3, so X equals 3. So X equals 3. So I'll put a little equal sign there, so X equals 3. So if this leg is 3 centimeters, then the other leg has to also equal 3 centimeters because they are congruent. They are exactly the same size. Now the hypotenuse, all I have to do to find the hypotenuse is I need to multiply the length of the leg times the square root of 2. So the length of the leg is 3 times the square root of 2. So we can just leave it like this, or you can get a decimal form if you wanted to. So you can see exactly what that number is. If you were to plug this number into the calculator, you would get a decimal that repeats, it goes on for forever, because this is not the exact number. You would have to round. This is more of an exact number, 3 square root of 2. But if you wanted to know the decimal form of it, it would be 4.24. You would just find the square root of 2 and multiply it by 3. Okay, let's look at this number 2. So I look again, I have to make sure it's a 45, 45, 90 special right triangle. So I can use my properties. My properties say that the two legs, so here's a leg, and this is the leg, and the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, so this is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse. I'm going to put HYP for hypotenuse. Okay, so my leg, remember I'm going to label the leg. I'm going to say the length of the leg is right here. So this whole length, I'm going to just call it X. So I'm going to say the leg is X. So if this leg measures X centimeters, and this leg over here must also measure X centimeters. And remember, the hypotenuse is going to be always going to be X. So whatever the leg is, then you have to multiply times the square root of 2. That's just a rule. That's a property. This will never change. So now let's look. They gave us the leg is 5 square root of 3. So they gave us the leg. So they gave us X. So X equals 5 square root of 3. So I'm going to write that in my chart. So one leg is 5 square root of 3. And if one leg is 5 times the square root of 3, the other leg, because this is a property, they are the same. It has to also be 5 square root of 3. So I found the measure of the other leg, 5 square root of 3. So I can write it on my chart, and I can also write it on my triangle. Now I need to find the hypotenuse. Okay, so the hypotenuse, this big piece right here, is always going to be whatever the length is times the square root of 2. The length of the leg times the square root of 2. So X is the length of the leg. So the length of the leg is 5 square root of 3. So 5 square root of 3 times the square root of 2. So remember from the earlier lesson, when you're multiplying, when you have the number inside the radical sign, you can multiply those two. So 3 times 2 is 6. So my answer is going to be 5 times the square root of 6. You can leave your answer like this, or you can get a decimal form if you want to see what the decimal number is. Go ahead and find a decimal form of that number. So your answer is 5 square root of 6. So the length of the hypotenuse, so my hypotenuse, this length right here, is 5 square root of 6. If you want to see what that number is close to, so you just find the square root of 6 times 5, and it should give you 12.2 rounded. Okay, so we are going to try number 3. So if we look at it, it's a 45, 45, 90 right triangle, so we can use our properties. So remember, the two legs are the same length. And remember, we called them X. So we're just saying the length of the leg is X. So the length of one leg is X. The length of the other leg is also X, but we don't know what it is, so we're just putting X. And we don't know what it is, so we can't fill out the bottom part here. And the hypotenuse is always going to be X, the length of the leg, times the square root of 2. This will never change. It's always X times the square root of 2. So whatever the leg is, you're going to multiply by the square root of 2. All right, so then I look at my picture. I don't know the two legs, but I do know the hypotenuse, right? This is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is 8 centimeters long. So this whole length of the hypotenuse is 8 centimeters. So I'm going to put this here. So X squared of 2 equals 8. So now I have to solve for X. So I set up an equation. So on your paper, set up this equation. X squared of 2 equals 8. All right, so I set up this equation. X squared of 2 equals 8. I'm going to solve for X, so I draw my line down the middle. All right, I am multiplying X by the square root of 2, so I need to do the inverse operation. The inverse operation of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by the square root of 2, divide by the square root of 2. So we learned today in class, earlier today, how to solve this one. So this is X equals 8 square root of 2. Remember, you cannot have a square root on the denominator. So you have to rationalize the denominator. So actually, this is your answer right here. 8 divided by the square root of 2, but you cannot have the square root on the bottom. So remember, you have to rationalize. So you could do two things. You can go ahead, if you remember how to do from the morning lesson, that's going to be extra points. If you want to just leave it as a decimal, 8 divided by the square root of 2, you can go ahead and find that. Take a minute to solve that real quick. What is 8 over the square root of 2 as a decimal? Okay, if you divided this using your calculator, you should have gotten 5.66. It's rounded, right? So 5.66. Okay, so we're going to rationalize the denominator. So I'm going to multiply by the square root of 2, the bottom, where we did this morning, and you do it to the top. You do the same thing to the bottom and the top, right? All right, so now the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4, and the square root of 4 is just 2. So we finished the denominator. Now we're going to do the work with the numerator, the number on top. So 8 times the square root of 2 is just 8 square root of 2. Then the last step is to reduce. I can reduce the 8 and the 2 because they are both outside the radical sign. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. So my answer is 4 square root of 2 over 1, which is just 4 square root of 2. So my answer would be 4 square root of 2. So if you plug in 4 times the square root of 2 on your calculator, you would get the same exact answer as 5.6. So the length of the leg is 4 square root of 2. You could write 4 square root of 2, or you can write 5.66. It's rounded, so 5.66. The more exact answer would be 4 square root of 2. Okay, so here's the answer to number 3. Okay, let's look at number 4. Okay, it's 45, 45, so that means these legs are congruent. And then my hypotenuse is across, which is 10 centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out my chart. Go ahead and fill this out on your paper. The first step is to write x for the legs and then x times the square root of 2. So then you look at your picture. They gave us the hypotenuse, which is 10. So I'm going to put 10 in here. And I put equals, the equal sign. So x squared root of 2 equals 10. So now I have to solve for x. So write your equation and try solving. Remember to press pause when you need to press pause. All right, so I'm going to draw the line down the middle, and I need to solve for x. X is being multiplied by the square root of 2. So I'm going to divide. You could pause this video so you can show your work. So I'm dividing by the square root of 2. So I have these divide out. So I'm left with x equals 10 divided by the square root of 2. So you can go ahead and find out what is that decimal if you want to. And then if you want the extra points, you can rationalize the denominator. Go ahead and find the decimal first. So if you divide 10 divided by the square root of 2, you get 7.07, which is a rounded number, not exact. 10 divided by the square root of 2, this 10 over the square root of 2, that's an exact number. Let's go ahead and rationalize the denominator. To rationalize the denominator, remember you multiply by the same number that's down here. So square root of 2 times the top, the numerator and the denominator. So square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4, which is just 2. So I'm going to write both. I'm going to write the steps. So square root of 4. The square root of 4 is just 2, right? So we're done with the denominator. Now we do the numerator. 10 times the square root of 2 is just 10 square root of 2. So 10 square root of 2. So I can rewrite it over here on top of the 2. So 10 square root of 2. Now I just need to reduce. So I reduce the 2 and the 10. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my answer is going to be 5 square root of 2 over 1, which is just 5 square root of 2. And if you multiply 5 times the square root of 2, you will get 7.07. So 7.07 as a rounded number would be the value of x. So each side, each leg is 7.07 centimeters.